And I realized that while all of those things I said were true, the prosecutor did lie in court, the FBI did obscure some evidence. I knocked the first domino down. I made a decision. I didn't make a mistake. I made a conscious decision. And everything that happened after that was my responsibility. Those things would not have happened had I not knocked that first domino down. So, really, the very first step of my reinvention was extreme responsibility. That was a big one for me. Then, once from there, when I accepted responsibility, it dawned on me inside prison, I got like a lightness to me. I felt freedom inside prison, which is such an unexpected thing. And then a question bubbled up to the surface, another leg of that responsibility. Okay, this is my life now. What am I going to do next?
Hello, welcome back. I'm Andreea Parc.
And I'm Alexa Dumitru.
And this is a Live Again podcast where attorneys and other professionals meet to discuss real life challenges and how our decisions shaped our journeys. Today, we have with us a special guest, Craig Stanland is a keynote speaker, Reinvention Architect, author of Black Canvas, How I Reinvented My Life After Prison, and a TEDx speaker with his talk, How I Learned My Greatest Worth in Federal Prison. In 2012, just a little bit about Craig. Craig Stanland made a choice that cost him everything: his career, marriage, homes, cars, and even his will to live. His actions led to a 2-year federal prison sentence and the unraveling of the life he built. But hitting rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Today, he helps individuals and organizations unlock potential by sharing his raw, powerful journey from corporate success to federal prison to a life defined by creativity, authenticity, purpose, and fulfillment. Thank you so much, Craig, for being here with us today. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you both for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. And I love the fact that when you were introducing the show, you talked about the decisions and how they shape our lives. I think that's just such a powerful thing to examine.
Yes, thank you. That's why we're having this podcast to bring our experience and guests' experiences that we all make decisions in life. And those decisions affect us one way or another. We can't escape that. And it is what it is.
The second that we make a decision, a consequence is born. I mean, it's an immutable law of the universe. And sometimes those consequences, they don't manifest for a very long time, but it doesn't mean that they're not coming. And I believe even if we make, let's say, a terrible decision and we go our entire lives and no consequence ever hits, the consequence I believe that we're hit with is as we are breathing our last breath, we realize that we lived incorrectly and we have regret for it. So there's always a consequence.
Always. Yeah, that's true. I've been following you on LinkedIn for the longest, and I don't think that there is any post that you do that I don't resonate with. And this morning, I actually listened to your TEDx talk, which, by the way, I'm preparing for my own TEDx. And I thank you. And I listened to yours and I was like, oh my God. Let me ask you, you call yourself a reinvention architect. And we show up online and we show up at conferences and we talk to people. The image is that we're all healed and empowered and put together. And very few people, and probably only those who experienced it, realize how hard it is to go through rock bottom and coming back to power, so to speak.
Ooh, that is a big big question. And I also just want to address something that you said in there, which is, I think that a lot of times we go to the conferences, people think that we are healed, that we're all put together, like you said, all put together. And I honestly kind of hope that people don't necessarily see that in me because we're all works in progress. We are not, there is the only final destination is our shared final destination of our deaths. And I mean, up until that point, it's just a work in progress. But in terms of how I reinvented my life, it's been an unbelievable journey, one that I wouldn't exchange for anything in all the world. But I'll start really at the very nascent stages of that reinvention. And that would be when I was in prison and I was sitting there just honestly, you know, thinking about I was pointing fingers at other people for why I was in prison. I'm sitting there going, the prosecutor lied in court, the FBI obscured some evidence, all of these things which were true. And so I'm sitting here pointing fingers, assigning blame to other people. And then one day, I'm just sitting there talking to a bunch of the other inmates, and they're lamenting about a lot of the same things, and they're pointing fingers as well. And my inner voice is just going like, "You burned your warehouse down 3 separate times to collect the insurance. That's not a mistake. You wrote 4,000 scripts for opioids. That's a very conscious choice. You're sitting here pointing fingers, and then I decided, holy cow, I have to turn the mirror on myself. And I realized that while all of those things I said were true, the prosecutor did lie in court, the FBI did obscure some evidence. I knocked the first domino down. I made a decision. I didn't make a mistake. That's a huge pet peeve of mine. I made a conscious decision. And everything that happened after that was my responsibility. Those things would not have happened had I not knocked that first domino down. So, really, the very first step of my reinvention was extreme responsibility. That was a big one for me. Then, once from there, when I accepted responsibility, it dawned on me inside prison, when I accepted responsibility, I got like a lightness to me. I felt freedom inside prison, which is such an unexpected thing. And then a question bubbled up to the surface, another leg of that responsibility. Okay, this is my life now. What am I going to do next? And that led me to the next step where I realized that I have accepting choice. Every single thing is a choice that we do. Every single thing that we do is a choice. And that led me into, I realize now, afterwards, you might have picked up on a pattern, but I now call them my 3 A's. And the next one was accepting reality. I'm sitting there journaling in prison, wishing I wasn't there, wishing I didn't make the choices that I made, wishing I was home with my wife at the time and our dog and our cat, wishing I wasn't financially ruined. And then that voice that led me to that extreme responsibility chimed in again. And it just said, you have to write all this, you have to write this down. And I said, I accept that I'm in prison. I accept that I made the decisions that I made. I accept that I'm financially ruined. About 3/4 of a page, handwritten of things that I had to accept. And again, I felt freedom. So really those beginning stages were accepting responsibility, accepting the power of choice, and accepting reality.
Yep.
There you go.
Tell us about your books because I believe that you either are done, published your second book, correct?
Oh God, I wish you are giving me more credit than is due. So the first book, which for anybody watching the video is right up there, Blank Canvas, How I Reinvented My Life After Prison. That is a memoir. It starts with the day that I was arrested and the FBI left a voicemail for me. I actually was not home when they raided the house, and it is just a bullet train down to rock bottom and how I pulled myself out of rock bottom. It was a labor of necessity and love. It took me almost 6 years from first word written in prison to having it published. And it's just something I'm unbelievably proud of. The feedback from readers that it helped change their lives, hearing from people that it stopped them from taking their own lives is honestly one of the most humbling and powerful experiences of my entire life, and one of many reasons why I would never trade my experience. for anything in the world. I'm working on the second book now, and it's going to be, I think, something that you talk about quite a bit, and it's chasing about how we chase that status, how we chase that lifestyle. And what I invite people to do, and what were four unbelievably empowering words for me that came to me after I was out of prison, was stop chasing and start creating. And so that has just been, those four words have been the foundation, if you will, of my reinvention. It's just start creating, connecting deep within and creating from that space and then contributing to something of higher service and purpose, more significant than myself. So that's just what, and I wish it was done. Targeting 2026, I have learned something about myself. My writing process is absolutely terrible. I wrote over 1 million words to get to the 52,000 that are in blank canvas, and I have to whittle them all down. Apparently, I'm the kind of writer who throws a ton of stuff up against the wall to see what sticks,
Yeah.
but it allows me to heal. It allows me to understand my material better. So it's been several years in the making on the second book, but it's starting to get a shape to it.
Yeah, I know how it is. My book is right there, the Live Again, and only my editor knows how it looked when it got to her. It was all over the place. It's so many extra things because I'm creative, and every idea that comes to me, I feel that I need to write it down. Sometimes Alexa laughs at me with, the Dory, the Finding Nemo Dory. Ooh,
Yes.
shiny, that I'm going after an idea. And no, stay here. Focus on what you need to do. So I know exactly what it is because I'm working on my second book for the past few years. So yeah.
it, I do the same thing. Shiny object, I get an idea, go down that rabbit hole, and just like it takes me God knows where, and kind of off track. And I've really tried to create a framework for the second book, but I still find myself going off script. I have a very good working draft. However, you and I, before we started recording, you mentioned perfectionism. I wouldn't say it's perfectionism per se, but what I have isn't it isn't matching close enough to the vision that I have up here.
Yeah.
And I think one of the challenges of a creative, whether it be music, whether it be art, whether it be the written word, I think other creatives will agree with this. We have to accept the fact that we can never match the vision in our head. And the goal is just to come as quickly. Alexa, I see you nodding your head like you get that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you just have to accept it. What is this saying? The movie's never good as the book because
Mhm.
we've crafted that story in our head, and that's something that I struggle with. So I've got a really good working draft, but I got to get it as close to the vision as possible to make sure that that big idea and the steps that are going to get people there are clear, that they're accessible, that they're authentic, that they're honest. Because I think that we're in a world right now where there's so much content and artificial
Mhm.
intelligence is just pumping out so much more. So I mean, we really have to be unique and share our story in a unique way.
I experience that with my fashion, right? Because I have an idea and I sort of got to a point where I realized that that's where the beauty comes from. The whole process and the fact that it's never going to look the same. That's something that I have in my head that only I know. And it's something that somehow still translates, but it's about the way that everybody perceives your art, right? That's what painters often say, that they like to leave their heart out on the canvas, and however somebody perceives their painting, it's where the beauty comes from. That's how I look at it.
I absolutely love that. And you just made me think of something where maybe if we take that vision that's in our head, that's a gift for ourselves.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
So what was it a point where you thought this is what I'm gonna do next? I'm gonna help people, or how did it shaped what you're doing now? When was that point in time, or how did you get to where you are now?
That has been a very long evolution. When I was in prison, when I went through those 3 A's, when I started writing the book, when I was doing a lot of journaling, a lot of meditating, expressing gratitude, these 3 practices, by the way, I still do every single day, over a decade later. I was drawn to, and I'm curious with your own experience in prison, if you felt the same thing, I started becoming just compelled to be of service. And I had no idea what that was going to look like, but I just followed it. And I just was like, I have to figure out a way to take my story and help other people with it. And I was writing the book, but I still wasn't quite in prison, connecting the dots that that was how I was going to do it. I realized through my journaling practice, I realized that I made a tremendous amount of fear-based decisions. And that is what landed me in prison in the first place. So my intuition kicked in and told me to write down all of my fears one by one. My number one fear was so crystal clear. I've had it for probably since the third grade. It was public speaking. So I wrote that down and I committed right then and there, standing in my prison cube, that I'm going to conquer this fear. And the ultimate representation of conquering that fear was getting on the TEDx stage. So it took me 5 years to do it. But to answer your question, I think it was that time, that 5 years from commitment to getting on the TED stage and that evolutionary process of conquering that fear. That's how that service started really shaping up because I was working on the book at the same exact time. I joined the group Toastmasters. Not sure if you're familiar with it. Public
Of
speaking
course.
organization. Absolutely have a warm spot in my heart for Toastmasters. But I went to that first meeting, was terrified, ended up becoming president of the Brooklyn chapter of the Premier Toastmasters. But that journey and seeing that when I got up and did my little 7.5 minute talk, that it was impacting people. So it just started further connecting the dots more and more. And there was one time where I was delivering one of my presentations at a Toastmasters meeting. And I was just in that flow. You know, that state, just that really cool, like you are on top of the world, everything is lined up, you just feel great. And I was doing that, and I'm delivering, talking about prison, talking about shame, talking about suicide ideation, and this inner voice, that powerful inner voice that we all had, it just said, "You're doing exactly what you're meant to do. This is what I am meant to do." And I get that same feeling when I write. So I hope that answered your question, but it's just
Yeah.
been a very long evolutionary process. And really quickly, I will say that I did for several years, I did coach people. My God, for several years, many years after I was out of prison, but I did coach people and I enjoyed the work and I enjoy working one on one with people. I think it's fascinating, but it's not what I'm ultimately drawn to. So, right now, my clear purpose is the expression of my ideas through the written word and the spoken word. And so that's what gets me out. And that's like literally, I put blinders in the best possible way on those two things.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful because probably I'm still in that period of evolution. But it's funny that my first Toastmasters was in prison.
Really?
Yes, we had a program in Danbury.
That's so cool.
Yes, and I was an attorney, right? So I spoke in court. But speaking in front of those people in prison for 7 minutes was terrifying. And my first speech of 7 minutes, I had 99 ums. The lady, the
I want to
counter, said, I've never heard anybody say so many ums.
just for
99.
anybody who's listening right now, Toastmasters meetings, you have an counter, and they will track your ahs, your ums, your buts, your so's, all your filler words, and it is one of the most humbling things when they go through the evaluation after And they're like, so you had 99 ums, you had 15 ahs, 27 buts. And you're just like, whoa.
Yes, that's the awareness part of, I need to work on this. And then I was meditating because you asked me how I got to where I am. Meditating in prison, also in Danbury, and people approach me. Why don't you teach us how to do it? So I had also in Danbury, I had a positive thinking class and I had a yoga class that I taught. Of course, until the pandemic hit and everything was closed and we couldn't do anything. But it was very powerful for me to realize that I was impacting people with who I was and what I was doing.
And they, sorry to interrupt you, they actually started calling her Positivity.
Oh, that's awesome.
We were visiting and they started calling everybody back and whatever, Positivity. I was like, who?
You're looking around.
Yeah, I was like, who's that?
And your mom gets up, you're like, wait, what?
Yes. So I realized that that's what I meant to do, and that's the purpose, to speak about my experience. And with speaking, because that's the beauty of being human, that we can learn from others' experiences.
And we learn through story. That's what I think. I mean, think about in school when people would throw facts at you, unless you were really, really interested in the facts that were being thrown at you, I mean, how many of us remember what we learned in history class in the sixth grade? You just don't. But story, story, when we tap into, so what I think is so fascinating is, if you think about it, you and I are in a very small minority, even though that there are millions of people who have been incarcerated. If you actually do the math, 330, 340 million people in the United States, as compared to how many people are currently incarcerated or how many people were incarcerated, let's say, within the past 10 years. We're a very, very, very small percentage of the overall population. So not a lot of people understand what prison is. But the power of story is when you talk about the shame, you talk about the guilt, you talk about the embarrassment, and you talk about what it feels like to lose freedom. Those are human emotions. Those are shared. That's why we connect. Our stories are the vehicles for the emotions that we all share. And that's where we connect. And that's what makes storytelling so unbelievably powerful. Because people, when I get on stage, I'm presenting to people who have never been in prison. The amount of people that come up to me afterwards and just say, you said this, and it resonated with me. And that's really, as a speaker, it's incumbent upon me to give them a transformation. And we do that by tapping into those deep, deep inner emotions.
The empathy. You tap into people's empathy. Just like the ASPCA commercials where they show the dogs on the street. They
Oh my
tap
God,
into your empathy to make you donate, right?
we have three special needs cats that totally tapped into our empathy. We have a tripod, we have one who has no eyes, and one who has wobbly cat syndrome. Totally tapped into our empathy. And we're now contemplating we're going to be potentially crazy cat people. There's one that's going in for eye removal surgery today. My wife and I are kind of like, do we want to be that crazy? But it's that empathy. And it's just that sharing that and putting the audience, allowing them to, you know what it is? I'll actually put it this way. I think one of our most powerful desires of our shared human experience is to be seen, heard, and understood without judgment. And when you share a story that is vulnerable and transparent, it allows the audience or the reader to feel seen, heard, and understood without judgment. They think that they may be alone in their feelings, but when somebody who is really good at what they do, whether through written or spoken word, they tap into that and that person realizes that they're not alone. And that's a very, very powerful thing.
And that's the reason why we're doing this podcast together, because a lot of people speak about their experiences, but very few people or very few children of people incarcerated speak about their experiences. And the reason why we're together is to share as much of our experiences to people. So again, they're not alone.
I think it's absolutely beautiful that you do this together because it's something so cool and you're giving back and you get to do it together. But you have two very unique perspectives and you can bring that and you're touching a wider audience because of it. So I think it's super cool that you do it together.
Yeah, we sort of, once we started to get in the space of my mom started to go to different podcasts and we started to talk to different people, I started noticing that the children of the people who were incarcerated, even people that were with her, didn't want to speak about it or just were completely destroyed. So she started going on podcasts and I started asking the people, I'd like to also be on a podcast because, I meet them and it's a different story when you ask in person. And they would always say, oh, yeah, we'll talk. And it was just kind of like a realization for me that, wow, these people only want to hear about fights, about the yelling and screaming in prison, about the food, they just want to hear the superficial stuff. And there are so many children out there who are completely left in the dust by this horrible experience that they had nothing to do with. And nobody's paying attention to them.
The completely underserved community.
Yeah.
An arrest going through this journey. I mean, it's like a boulder dropped into a completely still lake. The
Mm-hmm.
ripples touch everything around it. And one of the first ripples is family. And
Yeah.
I'd say that probably the first ripple in that family is going to be spouse and children. I mean,
Yeah.
and then it goes to everybody else, but it's children and people, they don't talk about how it impacts the children, and I think that's really, really important. So even if you don't hear from kids who are going through something similar, you're touching them in some way and you're giving them a voice and they get to hear, something interesting about this whole journey is unless you've actually gone through it, you can have empathy and you can kind of go along with it a little bit. But I mean, I'm 5'4". I have no idea what it's like to be 7'6". I can pretend to know what it's like, but I'll never actually know. Same with this, and same for an individual who's been incarcerated or the children of somebody who's been incarcerated. Until you actually experience it, you have no clue what that's like. And to have somebody sharing openly of their experience is so.
Yeah. Because you've worked with so many people and you've heard so many stories, what do you think is the biggest misconception of people on starting over after a fall?
Ooh, big question. This journey has taught me to go with that first little whisper that comes up. And it's one word that came up, rebuild. I think that's interesting because it sounds very good on paper. So for somebody who starts over, they're like, I have to rebuild. Rebuild to me sounds like, let's say there was a 4-story apartment building that had 20 apartments in it. It was painted white and had certain trees planted in front of it. And unfortunately, the whole thing fell to the ground. And you want to rebuild it. You're going to do 4 stories with 20 apartments in it. You're going to paint it white with the same exact plants. That's what I think a lot of people get stuck on is that they want to rebuild their life exactly as it was. And that is one of the most impossible things that you could ever do. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube of whatever brought you to, whether it was incarceration or a disease or a divorce or something where you find yourself starting over, that chapter is closed and you have to write a new one. So it is not the idea of rebuilding. And that's why I love the word reinvention. Reinvention has a lot more openness to it. It's got a lot more flexibility. If you try to rebuild what was, I'll use myself as an example. I was a senior enterprise account executive for a large technology firm. If I was trying to rebuild and fall back into that mold, I'd be banging my head up against a wall because there's literally a court order barring me from technology sales. So there's that one small caveat. Who would hire me now with that record? So to focus on rebuilding, to make it what it was, you're trying to capture the past, and you miss such an opportunity to craft a brand new future.
Yeah. Because I mean, you can't, once something fell, definitely you can't do the same thing.
What's funny, in my building example, you totally could do the same thing, but also think about that. That's a complete missed opportunity. For if a builder built the building exactly the same way, all the problems that they had with that building in the first place are still going to exist. Maybe they don't like the way that the elevator was set up. They were always annoyed about it or something like that. You miss an opportunity. No, you're good.
I was gonna say that you're also not the same. And a lot of the times you don't want to go back to where you were. And you don't want to rebuild because chances are, if you made the mistake initially, it's something that you weren't necessarily happy doing. We speak a lot about purpose and what we really like to do in life in our podcast. You'd be so surprised with how many people say, I never liked the career that I was in.
I made a ton of money. So people would ask me, because I lived a very luxurious lifestyle, and a lot of my friends or people who didn't make quite as much, they would just come up and be like, boy, you must love your job. Like, look at all your stuff. And my response was the same every single time. I love what my job affords me. That was my canned response. I did not like what I was doing. It had no purpose. It had no meaning. It had no fulfillment whatsoever. It was very empty and devoid of all of those things. And you touched on something so important, like when you're rebuilding, when you go through something, you're not the same person. When you strip away all that superficial, you have an opportunity. It's not guaranteed. You have an opportunity to discover who you really are. But that takes looking in the mirror, that takes asking really hard questions of yourself,
Courage.
that it takes courage because you have to really peel back the layers, get past all of our own BS, and discover what's true for ourselves.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a high performing professional that feels something is not okay in their lives?
You know what? First thing that comes to mind, I would ask them, especially the way that you worded it, what's not okay with your life? Identify that, bring awareness into it. What do you feel is lacking? Because a lot of high performers, they climb that mountain, they've got the professional success, they've got the lifestyle and status success, but something is missing. So bring awareness into your life. What exactly is missing? What do you think? What would you long for if you were to die tomorrow? What would you regret not doing? Get clarity. Clarity is so important, and that comes from awareness. But really, you feel something is not okay. You feel that something is off, something is missing. Well, start moving towards that. Put a face to it because you can't manage what you can't see. So just sitting there going like, man, I don't like life, but look at all that I have, so, and then also guilt kicks in because you're like, I want more, but I don't know what that more is. It's not necessarily materialism, but something's definitely lacking. Now I feel guilty because I have so much. I know this is how I felt when I worked in corporate, but stopping just long enough to say, what exactly is missing? I think that's honestly that first step is awareness.
Yeah, if money wasn't an issue, what would you be doing? Because a
Yeah,
lot
I
of the
love that.
time it's about money. I'm doing this because it offers me to pay my bills.
And I think that's an extreme. I love that question. I think that opens up the brain for creativity. And it's all of a sudden like, well, if I didn't have to worry about money, well, I'd write that novel that's been like burning in my brain forever. I'd start woodworking, like whatever it is. That's a clue. And I think what is so critically important for that high performer. And I am projecting a little bit because this is me, but I've seen it in a ton of other people as well. So I feel comfortable with the projection. I didn't think I could walk and chew gum at the same time. And what I mean by that is I was a senior enterprise account executive. That was what I was. I wanted to write a screenplay. I always had a dream of writing a screenplay. I always wanted to invent something. My father is a patent attorney, so I grew up in a household with the idea of inventions and things. And my dad has patents under his name. My uncle had patents under his name. So I grew up with that. I always wanted to do that, but I couldn't because I was a senior enterprise account manager. There was no room for those other two things. And I think that's what a high performer needs to know is that you can, in fact, feed your family and you can feed your soul. Those two things can coexist. And the most amazing thing is for the person who's so concerned about the money and the ability to support their family and to maintain the lifestyle. When you stop chasing all those things and you start creating, you access that part, it is going to be a rising tide that lifts all boats. You're going to perform better at work. You're going to be better in your relationships. Everything comes together. So you can walk and chew gum at the same time. And it's incumbent if we want to live meaningful lives that we do that. I can't stand some of these like influencers who is like, I'm going to show you how to quit your job and you can work on a beach in Tahiti. It's not realistic. It's complete BS. There are people have financial obligations, you know. So what I encourage people to do is to take their spare time, whatever spare time that they have, and we all have spare time. Take a
Yeah.
look at how long you're on your phone and on Instagram, how long you're on Netflix, and just start taking that time and doing something that's meaningful to you. Express that unlived creative self that's in you.
And now that we're approaching the end, there is the one question that I ask every guest, and that is, what is one activity in your life that makes you feel more alive?
Oh, I can only pick one. I'm very fortunate that I have more than one. So, what I am going to answer is seasonal. So, it's top of mind right now. I can't wait to do it this afternoon. Paddleboarding. I go paddleboarding. We are fortunate enough to live on a lake. We are also fortunate enough to be very close to the beach, so I can go to open water. So, that is something when the weather is permitting, being out on the water and just by myself. There are times when I am very far from shore and you can't see, it's just the horizon. And the osprey are out there and maybe they're diving and they're catching for, a fish and pulling it out of the water. It is so peaceful and it is so present because you have to stay on the board. The waves might be a little choppy, but it's with nature and it is one of the most beautiful things that I do. And I look forward to it pretty much as I can go. And the weather here, I'm in Connecticut, the weather's gorgeous, so I'll be
Yeah.
out this afternoon.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm going to cheat a little bit. You said one thing, but I have to include them. Speaking and writing are the other two.
Yeah. Yeah, nature, and especially for me, Connecticut, because I was in Danbury for 2.5 years, and that nature saved my soul, literally. I was outside a lot of time, and the greenery, the birds, incredible, incredible. So yes.
Really quickly, I know we're coming down to the end, but I just want to like share just how that nature and how beautiful and powerful that can be is my wife and I were out on the lake the other day paddleboarding, and all of a sudden this eagle comes swooping in 40 to 50 feet in front of us, and it's got its legs extended and its talons out, and it's going to pull a fish out of the water. And we just both stopped on our boards and just watched this. The eagle retreated at the last second, but it just took place right in front of us. And how special that is. How many people may go through their entire lives without seeing an eagle in nature? And here we are. I mean, talk about like gratitude and presence and the power of nature. It was just a very powerful moment for us to share.
I saw your post, and I remember that I was observing eagles when I was in Danbury for hours. And even now, I go outside. We're in New York City, but we're fortunate to live in Sunnyside Gardens, and we have a lot of trees and greenery around. And I stop and I observe nature, and I realize how fortunate I am to have this, first of all, have time to do that. And second of all, to have the awareness for this, because I've been living in the same place for 28 years. And when I was an attorney, I had this all along here, but I didn't have that awareness to pay attention and to observe nature.
Boy, I feel like the three of us could chat forever, but I'm gonna like rewind a little bit to that high performing executive and share with them what you just said in 2 words: slow down.
2 words that carry a lot of power.
So much power.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for being here with us. It was such a powerful conversation.
Thank you
And
both for having me.
And we can wait for your second book.
Yes, I will. We are connected on LinkedIn. I'll have updates on that. And if anybody wants to find me, they can find me on LinkedIn or on my website, craigstanland.com, and check out Blank Canvas.
Yeah, definitely. And I will link your information in the description of the video. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Our listeners, thank you for listening. And for more conversations and more guests, please subscribe and follow us. We'll see you next week.